Dee, thank you so much for being here with us today on the Your Core PT podcast to talk about overcoming pelvic pain with pleasure. Now, you are a seasoned therapist in retirement, and you keep going with your passion of helping patients or people with pelvic pain and now experiencing pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
It's been such an incredible journey. Um, as I have left my practice, where I was honored, absolutely honored, to be in front of women with chronic vulvar pain and sexual dysfunction, and truly have them trust me enough to talk to me about it. Their most intimate of details, their greatest intimacy. So I started with an incredible base of honor and humility from dealing with women with this. Um, uh, I that was a specialty in my practice. And in doing that, I always talked with them about their function, and that's what we do as PTs, and that included sexual function. And we talked about it, and I asked them all about it, and then I would encourage them along the way. And got to the point where I was pretty darn good at getting rid of their pain. So it was a really great place to be. And again, I always felt honored that I was allowed to do that. It was really wonderful. It really was my passion.
Now, you wrote me when we were messaging on Facebook, and you said that in hindsight, you felt like you missed something with
Yeah.
that pelvic PT mindset. What was it that you missed?
Yeah. And I think it's quite frankly, it's not just that we as PTs miss it. I think that physicians miss it.
Yeah.
Physicians who give drugs, physicians who do surgery for chronic vulvar pain, vulvodynia, vestibulodynia in particular, psychologists who use CBT. I think that we get to the point where we think it's okay if we get rid of the pain, if we can touch it and it doesn't hurt anymore. If women can answer surveys and they say, yeah, it doesn't, my quality of my life is better because I don't have vulvar pain, I can use a tampon, I can whatever. But we never talk to them. Well, no, that's not true. We ask them how sex is going. And they always answer, and well, yes, they are able to have sex. But regardless of the discipline or the treatment, our vulvar pain patients are never able to reach the same sexual activity level as those who have not had pain. And I
So that's
think
like research based.
that's
The
research based.
research says that.
We know that is the case. And I think it's because we get rid of their pain and we say, okay, go do it now.
Oh,
And women, and not just women with pain, women in general, have no idea what that means. What does it mean? Just go do it. Well, I never really liked sex anyway. Well, I had it before, secondary vulvodynia. I had it before and it was okay, but now, or primary vulvar pain, and you've never been able to do it. Like, okay, do what? I have no clue. So, what I was missing in my practice was truly teaching my patients how to be aroused. We talk about hypoactive desire disorder, hypoactive arousal disorder. It's hard for me to fathom how any woman could have sexual desire if she has no idea what full sexual arousal feels like.
yes.
She
Yes.
might have
So,
a, she might have
so, so kind of incorporating the pleasure principles in having them understand physiological arousal, going beyond just brain pain neuroscience, but also like this sense of empowerment with
oh my God,
intercourse and embodiment with a very vulnerable act.
this gave me goosebumps. Embodiment is the key. We need to all, and again, we can apply this to the vulvar pain world, and we will. These women need to come back into their bodies. They need to have agency. They need to relearn, no, learn or relearn what's happening in themselves. They really have to come back to do that. And in order to do that, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of self-care. It's a lot of self-thinking, redoing your thinking mechanism, and really hearing how to do it. We don't just naturally know how to do it. I think that's, as we all
That's
know.
true. Yeah. And it's so funny because in my own practice, like I do know that I am open to talking about pleasure and positions and relationship and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, I'm asking about comfortable intercourse. And I'm thinking about what is within the scope of my practice and what isn't, and things of that nature. But coming back to that physiology of sexual arousal, could you talk to us about what that is?
Sure.
Yeah.
Think of a penis,
Okay.
everybody. Think of a
Easy.
penis for a second. Easy speasy.
Got it.
You know, I'm guilty of gross generalization and saying all a man has to do is seriously look at this pin and he has an erection, right? Their arousal is very, very different from ours. Theirs is bottom up.
Mm.
Their arousal starts in their groin and
Hmm.
comes up to their heart. Women's arousal is just the opposite.
Oh, ours starts in our heart and goes down.
Ours starts in the heart and goes down. So if we try to go straight for that poor little clitoris, that poor little nub, that clitoris,
It's
this little nubby
irritating.
thing that we refer to as the clitoris, and our heart isn't there or we're not really ready, that poor little clitoris just gets beat to death.
Yeah,
The nub, this is just the clitoral glands. The clitoris is actually this gloriously huge structure
it is.
that has the little nub, the clitoral gland is at the end, but there's a body, a neck that goes up from there. And then it comes down into two thinner legs. And below that and back, the body goes back, and from that, the vestibular bulbs come down
Yeah.
and surround the vaginal opening. Labia minora sit on top of that, majora around that. So all of those structures comprise the arousal network. This is all Sherry Winston's work. This is nothing new from us. This is all the arousal network. And just like the male, to be aroused and to be fully aroused, we too have to be fully engorged
Okay. Get that
because
blood
we
flow
have,
in. Hmm.
right, we have, I don't know, I can't remember how many more times, how many more nerve endings we have in our clitoris than the male has in its penis. But theirs are all just centered just on the tip of the penis, and ours are all throughout the clitoris. So sensitivity, as we increase the blood flow, everything starts to become tumesced. The tissue is actually pushing the nerve endings closer to the surface, so they become more sensitive, so that we can get arousal literally from the body itself. Underneath the clitoral hood is an incredibly erotic place to
Hmm.
increase arousal, all down through and in and around the labia. The labia get engorged, they get filled with blood. The vaginal opening actually decreases in size because of the swelling of the vestibular bulbs. Everything just gets really heated up, if you will. And we can do that by self from self stimulation. And then that really is where I will be coming from with most of what I say, because we as women should get rid of saying, give me an orgasm or give me sex. It's our responsibility. And we need to figure out what we can best do to create our own peak arousal.
So even with self stimulation.
Oh, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, we always expect our partners, male, female, doesn't really matter, that they know exactly what we want.
Hmm.
And if you've never actually self stimulated,
Hmm.
which many people haven't, many have. I know that I'm sure there's a study, I can't quote it right now. If we don't know how to find our own pleasure, it's that much more difficult for someone else to find it for us. Now, others are totally different that way. Others are, I don't know what I would do without my partner. They give me an orgasm. Well, that's all well and good. But our premise is that my premise is this is ours. This is our most intimate, energy driven power that we have. as clitoris owners.
Yeah, and self-touch. Like a lot of times we talk about desensitization training with vulvodynia patients. We, talk about dilator use with people that have vaginismus. But I'm and every therapist is different in terms of their comfort level. But do we talk about self-touch in terms of stimulation and exploration and things of that nature? There I have so many questions to ask you. Um, going back to the heart down and talking about the physiology of arousal. I remember sitting in on a talk by a sex therapist, and yeah, she did say, you can blow on it, and a man tends to have an erection, and that isn't always the case. It by no
That's not
means
all.
is
It's a
always the
gross
case.
generalization,
Gross
but it's way
generalization.
easier.
But she also said that for a female, typically even getting ready for the date is an act of sexual preparation in doing that self-care and feeling beautiful and feeling connected to oneself. And then also backing the day up to, what was she doing at work, or what were they doing at work? And, how did what else is going on in their life as well. So, if the central nervous system is always in a sympathetic state, it's going to be hard to get into that parasympathetic state, which is like the place of arousal and letting in that blood flow.
Oh, absolutely. You're so on point, and again, gives me goosebumps. I used to tell my patients, just take a sticky note on the day, because I always encouraged my pain patients when they were getting through the process of healing to, I wanted them to initiate, because typically we as women, in particular, if there's a history of pain, it's like, ugh, you don't want to, or even when there is no pain, yes, ugh, God, I'm being put out again. I have to do this again. So I always encouraged them to choose, I didn't care when it was, and put just a smiley face on their computer. Because we as women, men are very soul focused, and women are, 360. We have too many things to think about, and if we don't really say, oh gosh, okay, oh yeah, I have to think about this. What am I going to do? What are we going to have for dinner? What am I going to do that? I need to light the candles. I need to remember to turn the music on. I need to set the scene. We're very emotional people.
Mhm.
Most people are emotional, but I think women really seek that pleasure, again, from here down. It's not just a simple slam bam, thank you, ma'am, that gives us really what we deserve. More
Mhm.
than anything, it's what we deserve, and what so many are missing.
Yeah. So let's say that I am a vulvodynia patient that was seeing you in your practice, and I've gotten to the point where I can receive comfortable intercourse, but you have a sense that I haven't embraced pleasure, that I'm not making it, that it's something that I feel like I need to do.
Hmm.
And maybe something that I achieved, but not something that I enjoy or is necessarily good for me. Um, because physiologically arousal is good for those tissues as well.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
how would you work with me to help facilitate pleasure and integration of sensuality and embodiment? What would be that next step?
Yeah, I mean, and pardon me, we've just talked about a lot of it.
Hmm.
You know, as PTs, we want to explain the anatomy. We want to show them how it works. It isn't mystical. It isn't magic. It isn't some dark hole. We've all dealt with that in our practices, but giving them something physical, and to compare it to male erection, it just makes it, oh, okay, oh, really? Who knew, right? So education, 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 I think, is key. And it's a long conversation about bringing pleasure back into your body, and that starts with sensuality. I mean, sensuality is not always sexual. And that's what we like to start with, is that you bring back things in your life that bring you pleasure, that increase your senses, and just go with the five senses:
Yeah.
sight, sound, touch, feel, taste, and do what you can do every single day to bring pleasure into your life. Oh, what a gorgeous sky it is today. And just taking a pause to say, oh, because what does that do? It brings down our sympathetic nervous system. It says, oh, God, is it gorgeous? Such a beautiful day. The sun is so warm on my skin. Oh, this is a great cookie, but pay attention to those things. We get so busy, we forget.
And so we
Really,
don't have to wait for our patients to stop feeling discomfort
no,
to start talking with them about
no.
pleasure.
No, and again, that's just what I missed. I talked with them about sex, and how many times do you when you go through your history, you say, "Well, do you ever have an orgasm?" And your patient will say, "No." Have you ever had an orgasm? No. And then as you go along and you talk more, you find out that they self pleasure twice a week. Like, well, are you having an orgasm when you self pleasure? Well, yeah. It's like,
You're
okay,
having
that counts.
orgasms.
That counts. So you're at least keyed into what you can do for yourself to have that orgasmic pleasure. We need to build this into your love play and build that into your foreplay with your partner. So one of the hardest things that I ever tried to accomplish in my practice, because
Yeah.
women were very fearful of doing that. Because if I can do it, he's going to think, oh, well, why do you need me? And my response to that
Wow.
is, there's nothing, you can't tell me that there is anything for a partner that gives them more pleasure than seeing you have pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
especially when there's been a history
Yes.
of pain.
Yes.
They don't want to hurt you. And
Yeah.
how many times have you heard it? Well, sometimes I just clench my fist. I say, oh, just go for it. Just do it, just fast. Just get it over with. I mean,
Yeah. And if your fists are clenched, you know what else is going to be clenched?
of
Yeah.
course.
We
So
got
it really is building that story
it.
throughout their entire recovery. I mean, it's just so integral. Should be.
Now,
It's
I
all.
know that I met you through Holly Herman, and I remember doing coursework with Holly Herman way back. And, she is very comfortable with working with couples in sessions together. And so, is that something that you do as well
Well, I
or have
didn't.
done in the past?
I had partners oftentimes come in,
Uh huh.
and they could, and my goal was always to show them that I too could replicate the pain. It wasn't that his partner, his wife, his girlfriend, whomever, just didn't want to have sex.
Uh huh.
It's like, it's there's really true pain. I always showed them my pelvic model, and I, educate, educate, educate. That's really what it's all about. Did I talk with them about him stimulating her or her stimulating herself and reaching arousal? No, that's what I missed. That's what I didn't do. That's what I
Got
should
it.
have done.
It's interesting because last night I was listening to another podcast episode that you did, and you were talking about how anatomy is different with every individual and wanting to prove or disprove if the way that something looks in terms of the vulva or the clitoris might have there may be some kind of correlation in terms of erogenous zones and ways that one likes to be stimulated.
Yes.
Have you found anything with that in your research?
Well, it's actually it's we haven't actually gotten to that research yet. Thank you, pandemic. We've kind of came to a
Hey,
screeching halt. So we haven't
yes.
really been able to get
But
that
it's an
done.
interesting concept.
It's a very interesting concept, and it's not new.
Mhm.
I mean, it goes way back to the Kama Sutra, looking at male, female, different shapes. And for instance, as you heard on the podcast, if you have a woman who has a short vagina, she has a little bit of prolapse, whatever, and she has a partner who has a very long penis, they're not going to fit together very well. Hence the O nut.
Hello, Onut.
Yeah, hello, O nut.
Product
Uh,
drop. Onut.
there you go. Uh, but the interesting thing, and I think that a real anatomically interesting thing, is the distance of the clitoris from the posterior fourchette, even the opening of the vagina, if you will. But the clitoris to the posterior fourchette, if you can only put one finger there between the clitoris and the opening of the vagina,
Uh-huh.
chances are you're going to be more orgasmic with penetration because you're closer to the clitoral glands. So this is what they say. If you can put two
Yeah.
fingers or three fingers there and your clitoris is way up there, you can have intercourse, but you're not getting true clitoral gland stimulation.
Yeah.
So that's an anatomical piece, if you will, that can have an impact. Now, we did a pilot with 24 very sex positive, very sexually active women in Boulder, where my business partner is. And interestingly, for all SPTs out there, 73% of them had experienced pain in the last year with either a gynae exam, with intercourse, or with the use of a toy, with any kind of penetration.
Uh-huh.
In this amazingly sex positive, really sex minded people. So we know that arousal has to happen regardless of the case. I mean, that vaginal canal is pretty daggone flexible. With a healthy vaginal canal is very helpful. If there's no endo that's scarred your uterus down, if there's no IC that's caused bladder pain, whatever the case, if it's pretty darn extendable, but we need to be aroused to increase that blood flow to help that pliability be even better.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. Oh, I've heard that about 90% of females orgasm with clitoral stimulation,
Right.
that only
Right.
about 10% happens through the G
Right.
spot.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, if there is some kind of thrusting happening within the vaginal canal that's kind of pulling that tissue and kind of flossing around the clitoris because it's closer to the vaginal opening, that makes sense that
Uh-huh.
that inner penetration may also just be kind of stimulating that tissue around the clitoris.
Yes. Now
Interesting.
take that a step farther, and if you're truly at the peak of arousal before penetration, and those vestibular bulbs are so engorged with blood,
Mhm.
your legs are engorged with blood, the body's engorged with blood, and interestingly, the vestibular glands come off of this thing at the top that's right on the backside of the urethra, right? Which
Mhm.
I think is probably where the sex people want to call the G spot. If you can be really highly aroused and that tumesced, we might have an increased incidence of orgasm with penetration because you're so tumescent, you're making contact with the clitoris with penetration. If you're not aroused, if the blood flow is, you're not tumescent, the labia are more flaccid, the blood flow is not there, you can have penetration, but nothing's really happening.
Yeah, so I've heard that the Skene's glands are periurethral glands, that potentially as those ducts go up, they are what becomes the G spot in females, which would be like equivalent to the prostate potentially in males, and why that's
There are those who
stimulatory.
think, a few, who think there is a female prostate. There has actually been a paper published, but there were like two people, and it was the reference they used had one or two people who think it is a female prostate. And that then goes on into female ejaculate and all
Right.
sorts of things, and looking at female ejaculate and seeing really what it is and what it contains.
Yeah, we
And
can send people to space and put something on Mars, but we just don't know about female sexual arousal enough
we
yet.
don't know. We know about this much about female sexual function. We think we know a lot about dysfunction. That's why we have the drugs to treat it. But then that's really where we're trying to go. We want to know really what really is sexual function. What is female sexual function?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for helping us discover that. And I'm sure that there's going to be some interesting research coming out. So, can you tell us about the pleasure pain coin? What is that? Do you
The
discuss
pleasure.
it in your book?
We do discuss it in our book. Elizabeth and I now you have to remember I'm about 5'1", and my business partner is almost 6 feet tall.
Mm.
Okay, so that we're Mutt and Jeff when we stand next to each other. Right. So I'm pain, she's pleasure. Think of us on the opposite sides of a coin.
Okay.
pain and pleasure, because they are at
Hmm.
opposite ends of that continuum. Right? Flip that coin. And what happens if when it lands with pain up? You see the word pain written there.
I don't feel good.
You
I
don't
feel
feel
like I'm
good.
having a bad day.
You perceive pain.
Hmm.
It's just how your coin is landed, and you're feeling pain. Nothing is good. You don't feel good. Take the opposite. You flip that coin. Sorry, it gives me goosebumps. You flip that coin, and it comes down, and pleasure is on top.
I'm thinking that the universe is on my side.
How about it? How about it? So, how about if we always think of that coin, and when it flips, it comes with pleasure up in whatever part of your life. Doesn't have to do anything with sex. Sex could be the last thing on your mind. But if every time you flip that coin, you think of something pleasurable, we know that changes your brain chemistry. We know it does. It changes everything about us. But we have to do it. Pleasure is a gift we give ourselves.
Mm,
And if we don't allow it or we don't invite it in, that's fine. We don't have to. But it can really just give us so much life and so much energy if we let it in.
great. Thank you for that. Now, how can we as practitioners integrate some of this information that you're giving us to make a difference with our patients today?
Well, that's a very good point. Elizabeth and I, at one point, I was gung ho on trying to do a PT educational course because I think we could do a really knock it out of the park course, and at maybe some point we will. But I, you can read our book that's coming out. That would be a good thing to do too. But I think just being aware. I mean, even just the pain pleasure coin, you
Hmm.
know, and just thinking about what is pleasurable. And anybody can do this. You can be a patient, you can be, from the moon, or you can be male, female, it doesn't really matter. Um, how do you want your coin? How do you want to perceive your coin at any given point in time?
Hmm.
And if it is pleasure, what is that pleasure? And how does that pleasure serve you? How is that gift giving you today just what you needed? You may have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. You may have a crazy day in front of you. You may have that one patient who you've been trying to say, this is enough. We can't do this anymore. Give yourself the pleasure first. Give that gift to yourself before you ever go in, and then work on sharing it. I mean, that once you find your own pleasure, our goal is to get everybody to go out and share it with the world, because we in particular as women are we can do so much more when we're happy.
Mm, that's the truth.
So taking it through yourself and through your patients, we can get to all of the manual stuff, the anatomy stuff, the arousal network, that will come. But we really first have to learn how to really embody or re-embody what it
So
feels
you're
like to be.
kind of saying in order to help our patients, we need to help ourselves first.
Yeah, I think so. I think
And
so.
then when it comes to patients, going beyond what is comfortable or functional, and then talking about pleasure and being open to talking about self stimulation and self exploration and what feels good, and maybe even mapping that on the vulva, and potentially even having those conversations with partners and bringing them in. And wouldn't it be interesting if we kind of, men and partners, people, some of us have very analytical minds and we want to see what hurts and what
Well,
hurt
that's our
in the
job. Well,
past.
that's
Yeah.
really our job, right? We need
Yeah.
to find what hurts,
But
but
then
we don't.
also, like, what is pleasurable? What is an area, like, what is the area, and then also giving plasticity to the brain for that to change,
Oh,
and
you better
giving
believe it.
permission to the patient to, you know, explore what feels arousing to them.
Yep.
If they've been experiencing, maybe it's kind of like spinal cord injuries. Sometimes people form erogenous zones in other
Oh, sure.
areas of the body just
Mhm.
because it's so central to who we are: sexuality, sensuality, reproduction. And so maybe exploring those areas that could have started as erogenous areas in other areas of the body. Like, do you like to have your back scratched?
That's oh, absolutely, and that's where we start with instructing in
Yeah.
sensuality. Do it yourself. Find what feels good. Find it may
Mhm.
be your earlobe. I mean, Elizabeth and I had one of the women that we worked with, and we're working with her in person. This happened before all of this, and and she has a horrible history of one of our horrible history kinds of things that we have heard over and over again. So just let your hands rest on your legs, and if her hand was here, let your hands rest on your leg. To her meant this: her fingertips were the only thing on her leg because she couldn't even bring herself to feel the sensation of her leg.
Mm.
And if it was positive or negative, she wouldn't even. Now she can. I mean, she's doing great now. But so we really have to just learn those places that feel good, that are not threatening,
Mhm.
and that partners can find those places. We can find them. You can work with a partner. You can, let's do this totally. There's nothing sexual about it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the old somatic or the old sensate focus stuff. There's no sex. There's no genitals. There's no breasts. Just, I need for us to have pleasure together. It might just be cuddling. It might
Mhm.
just be sitting next to each other. It might just be kissing with no worry that it's going to go on any further than that.
Mhm.
It might just be whispering each other. It might just be getting naked or taking a shower. It doesn't have to be sex.
Mm.
And it just is so valuable to make that connection.
Sometimes it's hard to have those discussions about what we like with our partner, and it can be different with every partner that we have, just how we feel open to discussing things with them. Do you have any like games that you can play with your partner to kind of like just talk about like, what does this touch like feel like to me, or where does this touch, like just some games for understanding where someone's head is at and what their body is at and what their general perception is?
There are all sorts of things that we can do. Betty Martin in the Wheel of Consent,
Okay.
talks a lot about consensual kinds of things. You talk about the conversation and the discussion,
Mhm.
and it's giving and taking quadrants, and you receiving or you're giving or you're asking or you're accepting. It's very complex, but it's really amazing. We have an entire chapter in our book on consent.
Mm.
We have entire chapter in our book on communication,
Mhm.
because it is so hard. It is, how do you communicate? First and foremost, you need to know what you want, but how do you communicate to get that? And there are processes, and I right at the moment I can't come up with anything in specific. I mean, even such easy things as yes, no, and practicing your yes, no, and that's more in the consent realm. Um, the sensate focus and finding things that are pleasurable on your body, finding out if you like light touch or heavy touch, finding out if you like um, if you do like things more in the BDSM world, if that
Mhm.
turns you on, and it could, who knows,
Mhm.
until you explore it. But it always, without a doubt, and from the beginning, is something that's consensual.
Mhm.
Even the conversation is consensual because it is so uncomfortable. And some people may not be ready to do that. And if you're in the dating world, when you can get back in the dating world, or you're meeting someone new, that consent may be very difficult because there may not be trust enough
Mhm.
to give that consent.
Mhm.
So it's, I mean, it, it's supposed to be so easy, isn't it?
And that's why it's important to have, case by case, one on one patient care to help explore that with
Absolutely,
each individual, to hear their
without a
story
doubt.
and, help them connect with their body and then connect with their partner and
So
facilitate
how
that.
cool is it?
Hmm.
How cool is it what we do?
It's really
We
amazing.
have
It's really
the
wonderful
chance.
work. We do.
It's just the coolest thing ever. It's just, It's such a gift.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the various projects that you have, how people can get on board with what you're doing, and
Sure.
they can find that your work?
Wonderful. Uh, we've done several things. We have a couple of websites, vulvolove.com, where we talk a lot about vulvar diversity and the importance of vulvar diversity and normalizing vulvar diversity, basically. There's some stuff on labiaplasty on there and education. We also have another website, pleasuremovement.com, that talks all things pleasure. It's kind of it's the most recent one that Elizabeth, the site that Elizabeth and I have put together, and it really talks about everything that we're doing, how we're doing the coaching, and what we're doing from there. We also have a non-traditional, non-bricks and mortar research facility, the Center for Genital Health and Education, which is at genitalhealth.org. And our goal with that really is to reframe the conversation around desire, arousal, pain, and pleasure, because we don't talk about it. Not only do we not talk about it, we don't know the basics. We just don't know the basics of female sexual arousal, desire, pleasure, and pain. So that really is what we're really excited about as well. We're taking sex out of the exam room and into the bedroom, which is where it needs to happen, which is really exciting. And probably the most exciting thing is our book that's about to come out.
Yes, please.
We're hoping for that to be launched in the middle of April. The name of it is The Pleasure Prescription, a surprising approach for healing sexual pain. It's been a progress that's been going on for quite some time. It's a labor of love, and we can't wait.
And so is that book geared more towards the general public or to clinicians and medical practitioners?
Yes. Yes, we've had at least 3 or 4 different people, proofread it for us before we sent it to the publisher, and it's basically in 3 sections. The first 2 sections are all about teaching women about their own bodies and their own pleasure. It starts with a chapter on anatomy. The second chapter is on pain. The third chapter is on sensuality, and the fourth chapter is on sexuality, and that's the first section. We really just try to get the woman either acquainted or reacquainted with her body and how it works. From that, the second section is about talking about how you got where you are, your biopsychosexual influencers and how that impacted you, your sexual core. What is your sexual core? What kinds of things do you like? It's a little bit into the size and shape stuff, and what kinds of things you like sexually and pleasurably that turn you on. And the last part of that, and the final part of the first part, is really a deeper dive into sexual pleasure, and really having you you along the way at the end of
Felt
each
like the
chapter.
second part was a deep dive and the third part goes even deeper. Okay.
At the end of each chapter, there's a list of prescriptions, if you will, and
Oh.
activities that you do to practice what was given in that chapter.
Oh, great. So some of those tools I was asking about, like games that may
They're
facilitate
all in there.
communication
Yes.
and things. Oh,
Yes.
great.
They're all in there. So then that's all about you, the woman, the reader. The last section is 3 chapters: consent, touch, and communication. And that's if you have the desire to take it to a partner. Because you take it to a partner, but you have to know how to talk to them. You have to know how to get consent. You have to figure out what touch you like, and you have to figure out how to bloody talk about it.
Mm.
So again, there are prescriptions at the end of each of those. There are 24 prescriptions, I think.
That sounds like a
total.
great tool for clinicians and
Yes.
every person out there.
I've already gotten a suggestion that, you know what you need to do? You can go ahead and publish this book, but I just need you to publish, and Women's Health PT, I need you to publish a book just of the prescriptions. Because
Yes.
I want to take it into the clinic. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's quite exciting.
And I think that one of the things that you kind of helped us comprehend today is that, pain and pleasure is an experience of life that we all experience. So
Yes.
even though we're trying to compartmentalize this to patient care and knowing how to treat our patients, we can also bring it back to ourselves. And a lot of this is intuitive work if we just give ourselves the space to
Yes.
explore it for ourselves and then also listen and be receptive and open with our patients, and
Yeah.
grant them permission to go through the experience, the vulnerable experience of not only healing pelvic pain with us, but also embracing pleasure back into their own life.
Oh my goodness. Yes, how thank you. How beautifully said. Yes, and it's just so true. Pleasure is a gift you give yourself, but you have to let it in. And in
Mm.
in these times and what we've been through, everybody needs more pleasure in their lives. That deep, that sigh, that just that little bit of added oxygen helps us
Mhm.
to calm.
Thank
And
you
it's
for
just really
giving
important.
us all permission, Dee, and for your book that's coming out. I can't wait to get my hands on it, and for being here and sharing your time and knowledge with us today on the
Oh,
podcast.
okay. Thank you so much for having me. I can't thank you enough. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. Awesome.